Welcome to the Grid Mod Pod, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, you'll hear from the utility industry's top operations leaders on how their companies are working to modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thanks for joining us.
Well, here we are. We finally made it, Kevin. I know that I've been wanting to get you on the podcast and hear all things Kevin. No, just kidding. But we're on the Grid Mod Pod today. And we have Kevin DeGraw, which I'll give him the opportunity to introduce himself. And then we're going to talk really about the power generation committee that AEIC sponsors. So Kevin, why don't you give our listeners a little bit about you and your background?
Sure, Liz. And I'm really happy to be here. Appreciate your patience. It's my calendar has been a big challenge here of late, but I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. I'm Kevin DeGraw. I'm the VP of Renewable Projects at Ameren. So I've been with Ameren for about 15 years, but I've been in this role for about 2 now. We are building out primarily right now solar. We have great opportunities in the Midwest in solar. I've really focused on that. Previous to my current role, I've had positions in fossil generation, nuclear generation, enterprise risk management, project oversight. So a number of different roles here at Ameren.
Awesome. And just for our listeners, something I like to remind them of is, we have built one of the largest machines. Now we have kind of a couple of those across the globe. And a lot of our expertise and our knowledge kind of goes into 4 pillars. We've got our generation, our transmission, our distribution, and our customer. And the big talk of the town is really all things grid modernization. That isn't just one of those. There's something in regards to change or things that need to happen to ensure that the current technology can withstand and really be present for everything that's happening in our industry. So what I heard you say is you really have grown your career in the bulk generation side, and your newest role is really looking at all those new energy sources that are becoming available. So that's exciting.
So I've been focused on generation through my career, but as we move forward and move into a more renewable heavy future, we can't live in the silos that we maybe have grown up in. We all need to learn about the other elements of the grid, because the non-controllability or the non-dispatchability of renewable generation sources really will challenge us as we go forward, especially as more and more renewables come on the grid. Whether or not the utility controls those or third parties do, we have to integrate those. That can be quite a challenge, and we're not going to do it as generation folks or transmission folks. We really, really will have to work together going forward.
Yes, and I think that's and something I bring up on this podcast is it's really important as the industry leaders to be the ones that are speaking and using the correct language around what changes are required or what is changing. I think everyone feels they understand the what, but I think the next piece is how and then who will be a part of creating these solutions as they move forward. And that's where we get a little bit crosshaired, especially when we that have understood these devices and how they all interlink and work together. There's a lot that goes into it. So when you're outside looking in, if you don't understand the complexities, it may seem as if we are in this state of non-change. But I think from your experience, that not to be true. So for today, I thought, and this is actually a special series we're kind of doing throughout the Grid Mod Pod, is introducing the various committees that the AEIC organization sponsors. And so AEIC is a member utility ran organization where utility members like you come together with your like peers and discuss topics of interest. And so you are currently the chair of the Power Generation Committee. And so I guess I would ask you to give a little bit of the structure and overall how these committees are led from your side of the business.
Absolutely, Liz. I've had the opportunity to be on the Power Generation Committee now for more than 10 years. Certainly not the chair the entire time, but it's been a terrific committee. I've really been blessed to be able to be part of it. It's a committee made up of about 45 utilities from across the U.S. Each of those utilities have one member typically a VP or director level person from the utility. We meet twice a year in person, once virtually. The in-person meetings are very, very rich. We have all 45 members there typically, and we provide presentations across the members to highlight lessons learned, challenges faced, and best practices that have been used. So it's a great benchmarking opportunity. Each meeting is a great benchmarking opportunity. I always learn a lot from the membership. We also have typically 4 vendors come to the committee meetings as well. They don't participate in the member presentations, but they do give presentations to the membership. Before the in-person meeting, we do surveys for each of the vendors who will be at the in-person meeting and provide the results of those surveys back to the vendors. And there's some really healthy feedback there, some real opportunities to improve performance going forward. So when the vendors come in and do their presentations, they first address the lessons they've learned and the feedback they've received through the surveys. That's usually a very, very healthy conversation. A lot of additional feedback comes from the membership to the vendors, and the vendors can also ask for help and point out where we in the utilities can do better. So that's a rich interchange, and the vendors who have participated have provided feedback that it's just a tremendous opportunity for them. They don't get the opportunity to have that type of direct, unvarnished, and constructive feedback typically. So it's a golden opportunity for them. The vendors also then provide some insights to what they're working on and where they see the industry going. So that's a great opportunity for us as well as members to learn from the vendors. So it's a really nice synergy there. So our meetings start at 6:30 in the morning, and we go until typically 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. But the good news is that last 2 or 3 hours is typically a nice dinner and a great opportunity to network one-on-one with vendors and other utility folks. So it's a great opportunity across the board, both for members and vendors.
Yeah, and I have to say, you are. That was the one thing that you shared with me. Be prepared to show up early and leave late. But I think, it's one thing that I don't think is taught, especially to the engineering folk right out of school is, there is incredible value with developing relationships and learning from those that have gone before, and the power of connecting with peers or folk that understand what you're going through. And so that's kind of a lot of the meat that happens at the meetings, as well as the robust conversation you just shared. For any utility member that's would think that this could be a great opportunity to be a part of this peer group, what are the membership criteria and who can become a current member, just really at high level?
At really high level, it's pretty easy to become a member. We just reach out to myself, and I'm on the AEIC website, or Mike Flanagan, and we can get you set up for the next meeting. But the requirements typically are that you're director or VP level person. Typically in generation, we're starting to look at that a little bit more thoroughly, because we mentioned before that we can't live in the silos we once lived in. So especially if you're focused on renewables but maybe don't have generation in your title, let's have a great conversation about that. The membership requirements thereafter are pretty easy. One is participation, and that's really critical. To become a member, you need to attend 3 in-person meetings in a row, but also give at least one presentation during those meetings and participate in the discussions. We really find value in the conversation. So participating is one of the criteria, and then you're in. So easy as that. Now we do ask that after you're in, don't stop coming. Right? If you need to shift your focus elsewhere, it's probably better for somebody else to be a member of the committee from your company. But participation is key.
Right. So on top of participating, remember that it's always open to have a transition plan, that you're backfilling the role after you find the incredible value that you do gain from showing up. So I guess from your perspective, being the chair, one of your objectives is there's a smaller group of you that to get together in between these in-person meetings as of right now, what are you guys collaborating around in regards to like what type of topics are ever interesting? And I guess I think that's a share to, those that are listening is the value of the committee group. It's not a very prescriptive agenda with, you shall speak of. It's really keeping the most rapid, interesting topics at the forefront of your conversations. So, being that we're in spring of 2024, what are the active topics that you guys are talking about and looking forward to coming together in the fall to talk about?
Absolutely, Liz. I should mention that the Power Generation Committee has three subcommittees. One's an executive committee, really kind of do the overall planning, high level planning for when our next meeting is, where our next meeting will be, what vendors might come in. Then we have two other subcommittees. One is equipment and one is issues. And each of those subcommittees identify topics to be addressed. So really don't produce a different product, but support the in-person meetings in particular and the single virtual meeting each year. That structure enables us to take the interests of membership and get them into the meeting. And it's very flexible. It changes over time. Certainly, if you took a look at an agenda from as recently as 2018 and compared it to an agenda from 2024, it'd be radically different. The current focus on the Power Generation Committee, though, is really the integration of renewables, which does mean how do we get more renewables into the grid, but then how do we balance that while maintaining reliability? Right now, that's a heavy focus on gas turbine technology and projects around gas turbines, gas turbine availability. It's a very, very challenging market out there. So how do we plan our projects and execute our projects in a timely fashion that drives good customer value?
And what I heard you say, and just interesting, big topic right now is inverter-based resources, which is another way of saying integrating these non-traditional generation plants that, we have known and kind of created and designed our grid to really handle, especially from a very networked, large perspective. And so in regards to the availability, the design, and really the standards and the requirements that you all are driving to ensure that they can show up in this non-traditional way, which is, for those listening, we're talking about taking the DC to AC so it can connect to the large bulk grid. That is definitely a topic of interest, especially with the new NERC standards that are rolling down around how to develop the models and put them into, your studies, and then ensuring that you're doing the right designs from a generator perspective so you don't detrimentally impact the transmission. And that's kind of full circle to what you were talking about. You no longer can do this in these silos, because the change that's occurring is, exactly what you're leading at Ameren, is onboarding these, non-traditional new energy sources. So exciting stuff. So just from your experience, you said 10 years, in the AEIC, what were, some things that kind of, you recall? And I think it's also important to differentiate your conversations. It's all lessons learned. So you're really sharing with each other projects, phenomena, things that you all experienced, and then were able to draft and share a set of lessons learned, be it a success, a failure, you're take that value and then, go back to your individual job and, kind of use that knowledge base to kind of guide your decision making, which I think is a very unique conversation than a lot of other forums where you're actually like, this is occurring, and then you're actually developing, creating tools or standards and specifications to advance that. This is the real-time discussion. So, what were some, not specifics, but, just like aha moments where you found value in a conversation and were able to like take that nugget of wisdom and apply it in your day job?
Well, one of the primary focuses we have is safety, personnel safety, and we do get the opportunity across the industry to learn, and it's always better to learn through other people's experience than your own when it comes to safety, right? We share safety opportunities and safety practices to help keep our folks, customers and employees safe. There are occasional issues across the industry that create perhaps for equipment that's similar from one utility to the next. If utility A has a problem, and if someone, hopefully not, but comes close to being injured or is injured, that information can be shared at a high level so that we can go back and take a look at the equipment we have and make it safer than it was. In the space of some of our fossil plants over the last few years has really been focused on maintaining operation reliably and safely with a minimum of investment. So that gets into many technological issues that are shared, and it provides opportunities when we get back to our home offices. And likewise with renewables and how they have come online, some of the challenges that one might have with wind production or solar. There's been a lot of discussion lately in the solar space about tariffs or potential tariffs and when those potential tariffs might be implemented. That's not particularly technical, although it can have huge impact on a project. So those are some of the types of things. And Liz, you're absolutely right. We don't create standards in this committee, and we would ask that each member take notes for themselves on what the best practices are. We don't publish best practices. That's important because every company and every person in the room is coming from a different place. So where they're at and what might be a best practice that they know from the presentation they're hearing is different from the person across the table. So we don't try to do that, but if you take a look around the room during a presentation, you typically see members frantically taking notes and creating their own best practices or their own actions once they get back to their home offices.
Yeah, and I have to, from what's going on, like especially like grid modernization, or like the name of our podcast, Grid Mod, is a word or it means something at this moment in time. So something that happens, in all things that we do, we create language around certain topics of interest. And I guess, I think I like to call it an essence, right? There's the technology that's changing. And it's just, when we say changing, ultimately, we have innovated as a society to do things the same but differently, right? So to provide the lifeline of society, but using new technology, new innovation to create that energy and then distribute it. So there's the technology part. And I think, the power of us understanding, we're just evolving with innovation like we've always done, since the first industrial revolution. The key parts, and you kind of shared, is you're all sitting in different utilities. And I've said this a couple of times on the podcast, depending on when you were first developed, the current set of standards and specifications that were owned at that time, but those set of engineers and those financial decisions is very different from your neighbors. But the electrical phenomena and the physicality and like the inner workings of the components have the same phenomena, but it's very hard to put like a peanut butter spread analysis of best practices and guidelines, because the people and who they are and how they showed up and when they showed up is very different amongst all of the various generation plants and all of the interconnected equipment. And so therefore the processes are ultimately very different. So I think the value of the AEIC committees, Power Gen included, is that's what you guys are fundamentally speaking of. You're sharing best practices or processes or perspective of various people that come together to create something bigger than themselves, and then pulling, the things that make sense for you that you can then move within your own organization. And that's really what grid modernization is. It's embracing change and then understanding the what. And we all are kind of maybe behind the why, but it's the how and the who that really, is what's needed from your level, a leadership perspective. So it's a very exciting spot, if I haven't said that enough today. Because one may think your conversations could be quite boring, but as I was taking notes rapidly as well, just you learn so much from others. So I have another question with you, because I know you're extremely busy in the role that you're in. And so I want to thank you for giving me the time with everything that you have on your mind to discuss this. But, as a member and really kind of a leader in your company, what are some tidbits or nuggets of wisdom that you would want to share for really the next up and coming generation? And, we think engineers and we think the physical workers, the linemen and all of those, but, utility needs a various diverse set of minds. You got your regulatory, you have your IT, which is huge. You have your human resources, your customer service, right? It's the whole gamut. So, but just for the next workforce that is looking to make a decision on an industry to get involved in, what's something you could share from your journey and really what you have learned for those folk that are listening?
Great, Liz. That's a great question. And certainly, I give this some consideration and occasionally think about what do I wish I would have told myself a long time ago. I would say, summarize: learn everything. Learn everything. If you're an engineer, learn some accounting, learn some finance. If you're a finance person, learn some of the technical challenges that the engineers are trying to overcome. You don't need to learn Bernoulli's equation, but get an idea of what technical obstacles exist. Focus on the customer. Get some experience in customer service or customer operations. At the end of the day, without our customers, we're not. That's our focus, right? We are in various ways providing a great quality of life for our customers. So learn as much as you can. That doesn't mean you have to try to take a position in 12 different organizations in your first 5 years, but participate in conferences that are on site. Volunteer for teams that are not in your area of responsibility or in your silo. Learn as much as you can. If you're an engineer, think about getting an MBA. If you're a finance person, think about taking some technical classes. Go to technical conferences. Come to the Power Generation Committee. Sit in and listen to a session or two. Yeah. We'd love to have you. The more you learn, the more you see how things interact. You see how things need to fit together. You understand better the challenges that the rest of the world and the rest of the organization and the people who sit down the hall from you are having. The better solutions that you can provide or create a team to provide. So learn as much as you can, get outside of your silo and absorb like a sponge.
Couldn't agree more. I agree. And I think, something that I've been blessed in the opportunity to have is, at first as a consultant doing studies and analytics, like I wasn't aware that it was happening, but you really wanted to understand why you're being asked and like how all the different groups that your output would impact, because those were your customers per se. So then when I came into the utility space, like I had a job per se, but I realized that my task triggered or created a series of events that impacted other people's jobs. So like for me to do my job well, I genuinely needed to understand what my job would trigger. So I was just, very curious human, I suppose, but I think that's something anyone can do is, you don't have to be in the job defined by whatever, job description, but you can be the one that asks questions and becomes a network and benchmark with all of your affiliates and peers, understand, what do you do impacts the other, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's great advice. You learn by doing, right?
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Grid Mod Pod. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.